My name is Liza Bernard, and on behalf of the Norman Williams Public Library, I welcome you to this special event with Jim Yeager, author of Identity Crisis. And I first want to thank the Woodstock Community Television. They're recording this talk, and it will be available later on their website and on ours. And also our co-host, the Yankee Bookshop, who generously donate a portion of proceeds of the book sales back to the library so we can continue to present author events such as this one. The format's going to be pretty straightforward, sort of. I'm going to do a very brief intro because Jim has a full agenda. And he will have the floor and be joined by several others who are on this path. And there will be Q&A at the end? Yes. Yeah, Q&A at the end, I meant to ask you. There is a sign-up sheet in the back. We've combined forces, and it's for both Jim to contact you later, and if you check the little box on the right-hand column, will also add you to the library newsletter so you don't miss other events that are coming up, and there are a lot of them. So without further ado, tonight, Jim Yeager is a trained biologist, licensed massage therapist, Reiki practitioner, and very accomplished musician. He's been writing and performing and recording for nearly 30 years, and he released a CD of the same title, Identity Crisis, 4 or 5 years ago now. In 2018, he began to experience paranormal phenomena. I cannot say that 5 times fast. And he received instructions to work with his close friend Nancy to address the dark shadows of their past. The goal of this work seemed to be a small facet of a larger blueprint, according to him, which the species could eventually follow into our next level of resonance. Identity Crisis is the story of that awakening, and I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Can you all hear me? All right. I want to start by thanking Liza, and I want to thank the Norman Williams Library, and I want to thank all my speakers, and I want to thank Christian and Carrie and the Yankee Bookshop for being here tonight. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I've never done this before, so this is my very first one. I want to start off just because this subject matter is so vast and broad and kind of hard to understand. I'm going to read from the website, the synopsis of the book. And then I'm going to go a little bit into the books just to give you guys a concept of what the book's actually about. Jim was sailing through his semi-interesting life as a massage therapist, professional musician, and generally happy and inquisitive guy. 3 days before Halloween in the year of 2018, he begins to experience paranormal phenomena and receives downloads from across the veil to work with his close friend Nancy, who by now is experiencing similar phenomena, to address the dark shadows of their past in this life and before, and to work through the misunderstood toxic masculine-feminine dichotomy which has plagued humanity for eons. The goal of this work seemed to be the culmination of a small facet of a larger blueprint by which the species could eventually follow into our next level of resonance. 5 years later, Jim is called to write a book about their awakening story and the vast amount of useful information that came through the veil. Despite knowing the sheer amount of ridicule and potential hostility he and Nancy would likely experience as a result, he writes the book anyway. This is that book. All right. So I'm going to start off just reading some excerpts from the book, just to give you guys an idea of what this book is about. Okay. So, just to set you up, I had already become friends with Nancy. Nancy, if you read the book, you'll know that Nancy is every part of this story. This happened to Nancy and I together. So Nancy and I had already been friends. We met at the Skunk Hollow Tavern where I used to host the open mic every Wednesday night. So it starts after we've already been connected. Or no, it actually starts when we met. So one particular Wednesday night, approximately 3 years into my tenure at the Skunk, I was setting up with the house band for the evening's festivities. Suddenly I looked up in time to see a woman walking through the front door who I thought I'd never seen before. It was an uncommon occurrence for curious local newcomers and tourists to walk in. But as this particular person stepped through that doorway and walked across the room, time seemed to slow down drastically. In that instant, I had this incredible knowing that not only was I supposed to meet her, but that we had somehow known each other somewhere or sometime before, and we were to know each other again. She sat across the room at a table by herself. When there was a break in the evening, I found my way over to the table and introduced myself to the woman. She said that her name was Nancy. She told me she was a big fan of live music and was happy to find such a lovely place. Like many before her, Nancy soon became a regular Wednesday fixture at the Skunk. We soon became fast friends and would spend many hours at a local diner discussing subjects like ancient Egypt, politics, philosophy, esoteric and metaphysical ideas. Nancy has a doctorate degree in adult education and has held many positions in respected educational institutions over the span of 40 years. She's traveled the world as a Christian missionary and has had many great stories to tell of these experiences. She's also a published author with 3 books under her belt. My point here being, Nancy was and still is a wealth of knowledge and experience. This made for deep intellectual and philosophical conversations, which is not the easiest thing to find anymore. So I'm just setting up, that's when I met Nancy. And Nancy and I had known each other for a while. This excerpt I call The Red Jacket. And if you read the book, you know what that is. Let me set it up. This was the homecoming for the Dartmouth. If you've ever been to the Dartmouth homecoming, it's like 5,000 people gathering on the green in Hanover. This particular year in 2018, my band was playing there. And this is from that night. The homecoming was on a Friday night. On Sunday morning, while I was relaxing in bed and perusing through my social media feed, I noticed that the father of a boy posted some pictures from the event to his social media page. I clicked on the pictures and started to look through them. When I got to the picture of me, the boy, and his sister, sorry, I forgot to take my gum out of my mouth. You can laugh at that if you want. I noticed that the father of the boy posted some pictures from the event to his social media page. I clicked on the pictures and started to look through them. When I got to the picture of me, the boy, and his sister in front of the bonfire, my eyes immediately squinted and became hyperfixated on 2 things that appeared strange. The first thing I noticed was that there was a perfect triad of 3 teal blue spheres, the type I had mentioned being driven to take pictures of back in the late summer, early fall. They appeared to hover right in front of my chest in a perfect triangular formation. The second thing I noticed was that there was some sort of creamy colored smudge over the boy's red jacket. The smudge also partially covered a large circular glow ring that was hanging around the boy's neck. So he had a glow ring, huge glow ring around his neck, and this was over top of it. When I saw the picture, I clearly remembered that he was wearing a red jacket that evening, and that the jacket had no smudges on it whatsoever. It was just red. At this point, I was getting curious about these oddities on this photograph. I zoomed in on the jacket to get a better look at the smudge. What I saw next set me off on the journey of a lifetime. On his jacket and over the glow ring was what appeared to be something shaped like a hand and an arm extending upwards. And there were other things shaped like heads. There were figures in front of him covering his jacket and the glow ring. They seemed to be some sort of entities not of this reality. I zoomed in further and saw that the apparition-like figures appeared cartoonish in nature. They actually appeared to be joining in on the celebration. They looked happy. One had its arm raised in the air, it seemed. I did a double take, a triple take, and then one more time for good measure. I simply could not believe what I was seeing. My heart was racing. I had always believed in things like this existing, And I saw things like this on TV shows and such, but never in front of my own eyes. I began to cry because I somehow knew, at a much deeper level, what I was actually fixing my eyes upon and what I was experiencing. So, a large part of this book is actual conversations that Nancy and I had. So what I did was I cataloged 2 years worth of Facebook messages. I went back 2 years and scrolled through, and so those actual conversations are in the book, just the way they were. So this was the conversation I had with Nancy. Me: hi Nancy, did you see the pics from the bonfire Friday? Nancy: yes, I'm thrilled that so many people were there listening. You guys will be famous. Me: yes, that's not what I meant though. Nancy: maybe I need to go back and see. Me: a triad. Here's the cool part. Still thought maybe a figment of light reflection, given the benefit of the doubt. Then I saw that pic that so-and-so posted. Look at so-and-so's jacket, almost like a ghostly haze. His jacket was just red. So really zone in on the hazy stuff and tell me if you notice anything. Nancy: oh my God, a hand raised in the image of a thin head. Me: oh my God, if you look close to the right of the hand, you can make out 3 faces. Cartoonish. I bet they were everywhere. This is so awesome. Nancy: no doubt about this. Wow. It is so amazingly clear, it can't possibly be happenstance. Do you have a constant ringing in your head? Me: high-pitched buzzing? Nancy: it's like information's being downloaded. Yes, very high-pitched. Me: right fucking now. Nancy: I've been warned that life is going to change and I just need to stop. To trust. I just need to trust. Interesting. So that was the 28th of October 2018. Over the next few days, I came to the understanding that what I was experiencing was possibly some sort of awakening. Maybe I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe it was simply opening up. For some reason, the spectrum of reality had been widened a little bit, more to my senses. And my senses began to grow a lot. It wasn't just about photographs or videos or entities or orbs. I suddenly became obsessed with the contrast of light and dark and what it represented, polarity. All right. The next excerpt I call Meditations and Visions. So this picks up in the end of November of 2018. So this has been about a month now. By the end of November, Nancy and I started to understand at a whole new level that this initial awakening was not some simple one-off event. Our lives weren't likely to ever go back to the way they were before. We couldn't simply unsee what we had seen or experienced. We both started having intense lucid dreams. I started to meditate every single day. Nancy had actually started doing meditation regularly before the awakening, but I literally went from never meditating in my entire life to meditating 45 to 60 minutes every single day without exception, sometimes for upwards of 2 hours in a single session. This daily practice continued for almost a year. Meditations were incredibly deep. I would feel intense energies swirl around my body like planets orbiting the sun. I would feel my energy body begin to separate from my physical body and then slam back in because it scared me. In one particular incident, I felt my energy body start to get up off the massage table in the middle of meditation. I actually thought it was my physical body moving. That's how real it felt. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to find my way back if I left my body, so I would slam back in again. I would have visions of figures not of this earth. I would go into some sort of circular type breathing. That's the best way I can describe it. Where my body was breathing, but I had no control of it. It's hard to explain, but it was as if my body was telling me that it didn't need me. inside to operate properly and maintain control over physical functions. Right. So these were the kind of things that started happening to us, and I'll tell you what I say in the book. You don't have to believe it, but it happened. Page 52. And this is where this is where things kind of shift, and we're getting told at this point that it's not about these things that you're seeing or experiencing. There's a larger message that's happening here, and I call this excerpt the work. So this is picking up in January of 2019. January of 2019 was a time of star picks, sun picks, and cloud picks. If you read the book, you'll know what those are. I began to notice that the clouds contain rainbow colors like cotton candy. This was also the time when Nancy and I really began getting into what we called the work. Putting this process we were learning into its work clothes. Even though we really didn't know what it was yet. So I mentioned the process, but again, you have to read in between to figure out. We were getting messages that we should be following something. It began to become very clear to Nancy and I had some issues to work through with each other and with ourselves. Issues with 3D male and female polarizing energies that have gone awry. We felt driven to do this work, as if her and I were somehow chosen to represent these energies at this time. It seemed like we were being selected to work through misgivings and misunderstandings between these energies that have existed on Earth for ages. I'm speaking of things such as Nancy's fears, lack of self-worth and personal power in a man's world, my lack of worth, power masquerading as unhealthy control, perceived power through microaggressions, male posturing, and my unhealthy and failed relationships with women. Things that have caused men and women to be very confused about who and what they truly are and what their roles are here on Earth. It felt almost like we were working on issues we may have had with each other in one or many previous existences together. As crazy as that sounds, the feeling was very real. We both felt it. Although at this point, crazy was a relative term, considering everything we had been going through for the last few months. So enter the work. Page 60. So I know I wanted to write an excerpt on it, or talk about this, because this was where most of our meetings took place. Nancy had this tiny little spot in her house that I called the Nook. So I'm going to tell you about the Nook. And it was if you've ever been to a place that you feel like this place is sacred, you feel it. Whether it's in your room in your house or anywhere, this place was sacred. The Nook. It would be amiss for me not to take at least a small portion of these writings to talk about the Nook. The Nook was a small sectioned off space within Nancy's living room. It contained an older wood-framed couch, a small lounge chair with ottoman, a coffee table, an end table, and the wood stove where Nancy would place the teapot to keep the water warm. Next to the stove was a small table with teacups, honey, and spoons. The wall behind the couch was covered with tongue and groove style wooden slats. There's something so lovely to me about wood on a wall. Above the lounge chair was a window. Through this window, one could see the woods next to Nancy's home. Many Vermont forest animals use these woods as a trail to travel through. Every now and then, we'd see a bear or a deer close up just passing through. Nancy would also sit on the couch in front of the wood wall, and I would sit on the chair to the left of the couch against the connecting wall. The chair was a few feet away from the wood stove. It was winter, so you could often see the snow softly falling outside the windows as we talked. I have such wonderful memories of the warmth coming from that stove. It added so much to the depth of everything else that was happening in that room at that time. The nook seemed to have become a portal to us, a place where we could step into and be completely transported from the weights of the normal human world. It was a magical place where we would spend the bulk of our in-person discussion time after the awakening, a safe space. For hours and hours on end, we would discuss and draw out deep feelings and hit upon the depths and the rawness of the human condition. We were absolutely and completely committed to this beautiful process that was taking place there in that little room. It wouldn't be a stretch to say that the nook was the place where the Iparara process was formed. So that's the first time you're hearing the term Iparara. And I'll explain what that is. I only have a couple more of these excerpts. Page 69 is the birth, I call this the birth of the process. Identity crisis and the birth of the process. As I looked further into my 2019 messenger conversations with Nancy, I noticed a pattern forming in the month of July. I started to become unsettled in my position. I was bothered by the fact that I talked a lot about making an album, but I felt I was stalling when it came to taking the first step to actually doing it. Now that I look back on it, I was definitely working on it. But much of my work was happening behind the scenes. I was mentally preparing myself, and I was getting ready to close current doors so that new ones could open. This was partially where my unease had originated, but it was taking time and required patience. Nancy, at the time, seemed to be able to see that I was already taking steps in the direction of making the record. I was having a conversation with Jan over here about Nancy before I stepped up here, and that's definitely a thread through this book, is Nancy knowing. I called her the Oracle because she would say very few words, but in the words she said, there was a whole lot of stuff. The following is a conversation where I gained some insight on the formation of the process and how it relates to the flow of the album. So the album, I made an album called Identity Crisis, which is the companion to this book. And I made that before I wrote the book. Me, I have to make this record. Nancy, you keep doubting. Me, yes, no. Nancy, now, it's making itself. Me, the planets flow the same way, I can see that now. Nancy, the planets flow the same way. Oh, I said that. Nancy, I don't understand. Me, the classical music, Holst. Listen to it, Nancy. The cycle, the process, polarity, acknowledgement, reconciliation. Ascension. This is the first time in our conversation where I started to understand the steps to the process in my mind. While Nancy's language was writing books, mine was writing music and lyrics. In reading back our talks, I can feel the energy of everything just beginning to form as a congruent idea in my head, something that I could begin to sink my teeth into. All right. So I started getting, for lack of a better term, started getting channels, and this process is all I can call it, came to me. And there's these steps, and I guess it's what I called it was the process of ascension. It's not something I made up. It came to me. So I have one more page to read here, because I want to. That concludes. There's 3 sections to this book. The first section is the actual story. The second section of the book describes the process itself, and the third section of the book describes the tools of the process. So I'm going to read the message. So, because early on, I kept telling Nancy, it's not about the miracle, it's about the message. That's what I'm getting. I'm being told that. And the message was this. And I'll actually reread it. Pretty early on in my awakening event, the idea came to me that this was happening to us because we were being given information that was for people like us who needed it at this time. I remember telling Nancy, it's about the message, not about the miracle. That statement just kept coming into my head. Because remember, at that time, we were experiencing all kinds of crazy paranormal stuff. I said it many times. What it meant to me was that it wasn't the intention of the giver for us to flaunt the miracles, because they were merely a catalyst to the message. And the message is simply this. We are one. We've been separated from our oneness and divine self by design. There is a way to begin to reconnect our human self with our divine self and find the balance between the two. This will in turn help us to rediscover the oneness that we all share. We are one. Okay. That's that. So what I want to do right now is kind of give a brief, because I talked about the process a good bit. I want to give a brief explanation of what the process actually was. And I said the term Iparara. And what Iparara was is Nancy came up with that. It was only the first letter of each step of the process, spelled Iparara, so that's what we called it. The process ends up being this. And I always have to remember these steps. Ego is the first step of the process. From ego, we get to polarity. So ego is defined in no less than how we see ourselves, who we think we are. But our egos have been separated from the other side of us. And we get to a point where that keeps spreading out. It's like a bubble, and that bubble blows up. And we get to a point called, I'm forgetting. Let me pull out the steps of the process here. Acknowledgement. And when that bubble blows, we acknowledge that we're raw and vulnerable in that moment. And once we're vulnerable and open to reconciliation, which is the fourth step of the process. And if we can make it through that step of reconciliation, we will awaken. And once we awaken, I'm just trying not to miss any steps here. Once we awaken, we're able to see things out of new eyes and new senses, and not be stuck in the bubble that is our ego, that what we thought we were. And once we awaken, we can be reborn. And none of this is religious, by the way. I'm not talking about religion in any way, shape, or form. Once we're reborn, we become creators. Once we become creators, we ascend. I don't know what that means, but that's what came to me. The ascension part, I mean. So this is the process that came to us. I have drawings early on that I did of the process. I didn't know what it was. I was drawing it. I was drawing things. I said, Nancy, I have to draw this. I don't know what it is, but I'm drawing it. And it's all in the book. Anyway, how are we all doing so far? Good. Okay. Huh? Better? You don't think about it until you're standing up in front of a room of 30, 40 people retelling your story again. And, I know some of this stuff can come across as very unbelievable, but it's very real, and it happens. So, wow, that went pretty quick, I guess. So I guess we're at the point of testimonials, right? Yeah, so this is the really beautiful part of this whole thing. Through this process of writing this book, I had a bunch of people that bought the book and read the book again, and then read the book again, and said, can I speak on how this book affected me? Well, I said, will you speak on how this book affected you? They're like, hell yeah. So this is amazing. And The first thing I want to do, though, before I get to the people that are actually here, is Nancy could not be here tonight. So she actually wrote something for me, and she asked me to read it. I can't even begin to tell you how Nancy and I are connected. And it's not like that. I mean, to come to realize that you potentially have known somebody for 1,000 years and say that to people in public. And by the way, Nancy wrote 2 books on past lives based on our time together. So, you know, and I helped her write one of them because I remembered she was writing a part about a guy, and I said, it's not what he did. She goes, what? I said, it's not what he did. It's not how he reacted. Because I was feeling him. I was inside of him. So this is from Nancy. Greetings to old friends and those I have yet to meet. I wish I could be there with you today, but I'm hidden away in middle Georgia, enjoying the blossoming of spring while you are still wrapped in coats and sporting mud boots. In case you doubt the authenticity of Jim's printed words, I write to assure you that indeed I was there, and in the telling of the story have closely scrutinized each word, each concept, and each overarching theme. In many ways, I'm satisfied with not being present today because this isn't my story, and in many ways, it's not even Jim's story. It's yours. If there is a pull on your heartstrings by reading this book, it's because you are called to examine your own life and consider your own identity crisis in light of consciousness that reaches beyond that which you previously understood. So I wish you peace as I bow before you and humbly ask that you consider the message Jim's book sparks along your own path in your own life's journey. With deep respect and love, Jim's Nancy. That's Nancy. All right. So first I'd like to call up, and I didn't let these guys know which order I was going to call them in, or maybe I did. Rain, could you come up and talk for us? So we have this, there we go. Can you do this with a handheld?
Probably.
Okay.
I'm Rain. I don't know. Can you hear me? Okay. I met Jim as a musician. I am a fellow musician. And when I heard he had a book, I had to read it. And after reading the book the first time, I got to know Jim better. And I had to reread it. It's something you have to reread. There's so much packed into the short book to think about. I found the book at a time when I had put my personal growth aside, and reading it sparked an interest in learning more about myself again. Getting back in touch with the process of growth I had gotten so far with at the time. The book describes a very intense, daunting process with such positivity and encouragement. It's wonderful. Jim's story is very emotional, and connecting with an author in such a raw, meaningful way was new to me. The descriptive writing of how he was honestly feeling was a nice change from other content I had been consuming. I felt seen after reading the book for the first time. The understanding and knowing gave me a feeling of connection. The work that was described in later chapters made me feel understood as it related to my own experience with mindfulness in my daily life, which was the growth I was gaining. Reading through the second time, I about filled all the margins with notes, thoughts, ideas, experiences, and questions. thinking about different perspectives, possibilities, this book and its ideas could relate to. Uh, I wanted to share this story with so many people in my life, and I know they might not be ready for the ideas at their point in their life, but I hope that they stick with it. So I'm gonna end up buying the book for everyone. um, this book also inspired me as an artist. Um, I'm a traditional artist and musician, and uh, the fact that this is an album and a book, it's the whole thing is very artistic to me, and that's like everything I live for. um, uh, it's very the ideas and descriptions have inspired me. Both drawings and songs have come from exploration of the ideas. One night after reading a section, I picked up my guitar and a song just spilled out of me, and it was such an experience. Uh, Unintentionally inspired by the book, the song is a expression of sorts of the strong message of overcoming fear and embracing love, having a choice of how to live your life each day, moving forward, overcoming obstacles, and choosing love. I've gotten so much from the story already, and I know throughout my life I'm going to reread the book over and over. There's a lot to learn and understand, and I hope everyone can gain something from it. And I want to thank Jim for sharing his story because it's affected me deeply.
Awesome. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
All right. Ann. By the way, it takes a lot of courage to get up here and say that not only have I read the book, but I want to speak about it, so thank you, Ann. And thank you, Ray.
I'm by no means a speaker. I'm going to wing this. The first thing that really caught me with this book was the message, the oneness of it all. And I've always felt like, yeah, we are all one little bitty piece of one big piece. Like I envision this big pot of energy. And when we're born, or any living thing, we come from that pot. We live our life in this modality. When that's over, we go back in the pot. And then at some point, we get to live another life. And it's like the original recycling, you know? It just keeps going round and round. And it is true when you stop and think about even somebody you may totally disagree with, they annoy you, you don't understand them, but there's a piece of that in you too. Quite often, we end up interacting with people that seem so opposite, and that's kind of reflecting, oh, maybe you should think about this too. So the whole oneness piece is, to me, that's all it. It's so relatable, the book. Being analytically minded, I love the part where it's laid out, the different steps in the process, and explaining it thoroughly. Love that piece of it. I think for anybody local, his writing about the skunk, and I know the diner and places, you can just envision him, the hike up Mount Tom in the middle of winter with no gloves. I hike up it in the middle of the night in the summertime to catch the sunrise, but you can envision his going through this and having things happen to him. I have had moments where I've always thought there's other levels of consciousness or whatever. And I did experience it once. I was just standing at the sink doing my dishes, and all of a sudden I was just somewhere that I have never felt such complete clarity and peace and beauty. It was just like, "Ah." And then it went away just as quick as it was there. But at that time, I needed to know that that existed. So hopefully I will see that again. Um, and the part about the prickly bush going round and round with that, um, and finally breaking through, and you see a new reality that spoke to me very much also. That you get caught up and you're just round and round circles, and then you just say, had enough, and boom, there you are. And things look completely different had you only known long ago. So I thank you for writing this book and reaching out to me and sharing it. We actually, I had known of Jim through his music. And when I saw online he'd written the book, I ordered one, and I waited and waited, and it didn't come. And I checked with the bank, my check had gone through. So I finally contacted him, and he was very apologetic, even brought the book to the Green in Woodstock to give it to me personally, where we got to chat a little bit more. So he's a heck of a guy. Thank you.
Also, Nancy sent her 2 of her books for free as well. Thank you, Anne. Richard, would you like to come up? Yes, sir.
All right, how you guys doing? My name is Richard. Um, I I'm gonna start with the kind of story how Jim and I kind of connected, that got us to the book. So oddly enough, we first met at Skunk Hollow back in 2016.
Oddly enough.
I know. When I was up here for like a year, and then I went to Boston, came back in the fall of 2019. And Jim and I reconnected last fall there at Skunk, ran into each other. I was having dinner, and a friend of mine, got up, and, Jim walked in. We talked for like a quick, just couple of minutes, and just had a connection. We got deep a little bit about life, and we said, let's get together, have a cup of coffee, and talk. And so we did, just like a month later, and we Montverde, it was right in the middle of foliage, met for a cup of coffee. Big foliage bus right in front. So we walked out and sat at the picnic tables out here on a beautiful day, and just really started talking about life and kind of transformation. A lot of, I had been going through a lot as far as my own, transformation. That's what brought me back up here, and so we connected in that way. And as we kept talking, and hitting on different topics and about life and identity and all this stuff, Jim would say, read the book. and then we would continue. We went down to where Dreamscape Coffee is now. We sat outside it was a good couple hours. And we kept talking and hitting on topics. And he'd say, you got to read the book. You got to read the book. And so at the end of our conversation, Jim graciously grabbed, a copy of the book and gave it to me. And so just a couple weeks later, I sat down, read the whole book, pretty much in one day, finished it the next morning. And I think the biggest connection of it all that I had was just identity crisis in general. And everything in the book, but it directly connected to me because I was going through sorry, I was going through it. And so, reading it, and the beginning, sorry. Anyway, sorry.
Don't be sorry. This is real.
But, so I had no connection at all. No, just kidding. Just to get, yeah, so obviously there is a connection. But the story and talking about the book, I think what immediately drew me in the most to his book is the truth, and honesty of his story. And, he talked about the line of, you can believe it, but it really, it didn't really.
You don't have to believe it,
You don't
but
have to
but
believe
it happened.
But it happened. And I think that everything he wrote, between the correspondence with he and Nancy, and telling the story, and the build-up, it was so, there's no, he defined that statement and everything. Sorry. And everything he wrote. So you never for a moment, you're so enraptured in the story that you never doubted that for 1 second. That was, I think, the most compelling part of the story, is that you were drawn in. It didn't leave you to question whether or not it happened or not, because it did, and you felt it. That was the connection. Yeah. And so I'm going to read. So maybe I'm not so emotional. So I'm going to read something. This is what I wrote. As far as a testimonial for the book. So this is what I sent Jim. An amazing story of a true spiritual awakening. An almost unbelievable story that is made viscerally real and believable through Jim's consistent thread of truth and humility throughout the recanting of his experience. The instinctual openness and vulnerability that Jim allowed himself to feel and trust, allowing all of the signs to reach him, is the deepest example of courage and belief. I highly recommend this book to anyone who wants a better understanding of our true identities and how a simple awareness leads us to a deeper understanding of ourselves. Jim details this process magnificently. And so that's what I wrote as far as, the best, 3 sentences I could to encapsulate the whole book. And I think the 2 words to me that I connect with the most is courage and belief. It takes a lot of courage, to allow yourself to feel, to see the signs, to connect with someone else, and share that. And then it takes a lot more to believe. And I think that is the essence of the book. I think it is an unbelievable story. I think the process of us figuring out identity, our own identity, the identity bubbles, we talked about that in our initial conversation. I said the same thing in my own writing, and February 2020, right before the pandemic and the quarantine. I looked back at my journal. We were talking, and I said, I commented on identity bubbles, all of that. And it was just, we had a lot of those connections. And so yeah, the last thing I just want to read real quick, because to me this is the best takeaway at the end on page 189 in the reflections portion. I just want to read what Jim wrote, because I feel like this is a great way that kind of wraps everything up. When I immersed myself, I was able to get the depths of the story and the process that needed to be expressed. When I immersed myself and felt the feelings of immersion, I could see very clearly how much of my time I was wasting talking about my dreams while not matching my actions to my intentions. I now see how vital immersion and commitment are to the realization of a dream and to the authenticity of being a creator. And that's, I think, to me, the essence of the whole book, and the authenticity of being a creator, and that's what we all are. So,
Thank you.
anyway, thank you.
Wow. Thanks, man. Sorry. Talk about courage. Is this still on? Can you hear me? Can I? Okay. Huh? Oh, can I just use this one? Check, check. All right. All right, we got to get going here. Thank you, Richard. That was amazing. Where's my list? Oh. Yes. Dave. This is my brother, everybody. He's up here from Pennsylvania. He's actually, well, I'll let you tell him. Tell him why you're up here.
Hi, I'm Dave. And in case you didn't get it, I'm Jim's brother. No, I'm actually up here because I'm staying over at Killington and speaking tomorrow at a mental health conference. So thank you. Thank you. Just a little bit about me, because it's important to the story with Jim. Okay, so I went through and I marked a whole bunch of stuff in the book that I wanted to bring up. Forget that. I want to talk about him. Okay. All right, thanks. All right, so first things first. For myself, the reason I'm here and I'm speaking at a mental health conference is I'm a military veteran who struggled with an extreme gambling addiction for a number of years. And it crushed my life until I learned exactly what it was, and I learned how to become a better version of myself. So just keep that in mind for a second, okay? There's something, I've known Jim for a little while now. And Jim, if you know his story, you know he went through a lot of rough years as well, right? We all did. All of us in our family went through rough years when we were growing up. And for Jim, it got extreme at times. But there's one thing that's been consistent Jim's entire life that I know about him. He's not afraid of the truth. He's never been afraid of the truth. When we were this big and we were running all around and getting in trouble and all of these things, he stood up to his truth. So when you read this, you can believe that what he tells you in here is his truth, because it is. And I know that because not only did I get to read it, but I got to experience it while he was writing it, and I want to tell you a story about that. In February of 2020, I was in a residential VA treatment program for my gambling addiction, which finally brought me to where I am today. While I was there, I went through sort of a transformation, because for many, many years, I hid from myself, and I hid myself from everybody else. I was afraid of who I was. I was afraid of sharing who I was. I wouldn't talk about things, right? So while I was at that treatment center, one of the things I wanted to do was uncover what was beneath my addiction and find out who I was and try to become a better version of ourselves. So during that time, this was the time while, Jim, you were formulating all the ideas that were going to be in here, and we started to talk about 3 pieces that I experienced as Jim was talking about them. The first of which was ego and the bubble, right? And the understanding that the longer that I kept doing the same things that I was doing and identified myself as that person, the longer I was going to stay in that bubble. That was part one. Okay? Then came polarity. And the polarity was the realization that if I started to let go of some of the fears that I had, if I started to let go and become a little bit vulnerable, right, and allow myself to get uncomfortable and all that, I could move away from this ego bubble. That was part two. And as I did that, we began to even scratch on the surface of acknowledgement. We began to move towards that peace, and all of these were conversations he and I had over the phone while I was there. We talked often. And he would bring up these ideas because while he was coming up for him, he couldn't help but talk about them because it was so powerful for him. Yet at the same time, I'm moving in a similar journey, in a similar path at exactly the same time. So to have all of that happen right at the same time was no accident. That was no accident. That was meant to happen that way. For both of us, I think, really. Right? I'm not saying I helped him wrote this. No, this was all Jim, and this was all what came through him. But I was just blessed to be a part of that process because also I got to step into that journey as well. So for that, I will be grateful for the rest of my life. So what I'll tell you is this. And again, I want to go back to the fact that his entire life, Jim has been all about truth. He's never hid from anything. And I learned honesty, honestly, through talking to Jim, through things that he would say to me. But one thing I know about this, right? When you read this, you can say that Jim believes this. I'm going to say it goes beyond that. This is not a belief. This is a knowing. Okay? This is a knowing that Jim just didn't magically come up with on his own. This came to him and through him. And when you read it, you feel it. You feel the energy of what he's saying. There is one thing I want to talk about with the book itself that I really love, and is that he talks about the Iparara process and how to move to each one of these different steps and everything. But then guess what? At the back end of the book, he teaches you how to do it. He gives you an instruction book. He gives you step by step to say, okay, you want to learn how to do this? Read this and then apply it to your own life and see how it works for you. Right? So not only is it a story of how to get there, of how he got there, but it's a story of how you can work towards getting there too. So, and then I'm going to close out with this because I've been talking way too long already anyway, is that as each of us, as this begins to expand out, not only does each of us grow as a person, but collectively we grow. And there's way more power in all of this than any one of us brings into this room. So, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, brother. Take your book. Stop throwing my book around. I want to clarify one thing that Dave said, in that we may all be each going through these things, but we come in at different levels, and some people just come in having it together. Some of us have bigger bubbles, and some of us, this is just what came through to me. And people can define it their own way and how it happens to them or what happens to them. So, all right, I want to, for my last speaker, I want to bring up Miss Julia here. And I call her Miss Julia because she's a preschool teacher. Yay, Miss Julia.
I have to do some time management like I do as a teacher because we're way past time. So I'm going to simmer. We're not?
No.
Well, okay.
You have,
I'm still going to.
you have about 5 minutes.
Okay. So.
No, Liza was nice enough to give us extra time, so thank you, Liza.
Thank you, Liza. To say that this book was a life-changing catalyst for me is an understatement. It literally pulled me out of a multi-year depression. I came across this book in a very synchronistic way. I met Jim through a friend, and I was already kind of looking out for a personal growth book that I could facilitate a personal growth opportunity in my community with. And when I met him, the day I met him out and about, one of the first things he said was, I just wrote a book about my spiritual awakening. And I was like, well, where can I buy it? And he said, I have it in my car. And I said, how much? And he said, $20. And I said, here's $20. And I read the whole first section within 2 days. And then I got to the second session, and it's a lot more really good information, but there's so much to it that I had to slow way down. I see you nodding. I had to slow way down. So it took me like a good month to read those last 2 and 3 sections. But as soon as I did, I can't even explain what happened. Like life became effortless. I had more motivation, no depression, not even less depression, but like my depression completely lifted immediately. I had more joy, less fear-based thoughts. I had more authenticity and less people pleasing. I started identifying with the idea that of like alignment. Like I wasn't afraid when things didn't work out anymore, and realized that that's not failure, that's alignment. Um, I started becoming more magnetic again. New friends, new groups, new opportunities came my way, like just flooding toward me. Um, I started talking to my inner wise woman, and she would always answer me with complete calm. I've had less overwhelm about current events and more focus on creating what's new for us. Because one of his main messages is like being a creator and dealing with those blocks to become more of a creator and less of a victim. Um, yeah, just magic has been happening. And I think that one of the reasons that this book is so powerful, I've been reading, I'm 47 and I've been reading personal growth books since I was 19 years old. And the difference between this book and all of the hundreds that I've read before is that, and it's a common theme that you've already heard, is that he is so vulnerable and so authentic. And there's something about that that makes it, I don't know, sink in. It makes it more magic. It makes it sink in more. I can't really explain it, but um, it's been a really powerful ride these last months that I've been going through this process and becoming more of a creator. And yeah, thank you. Thank you.
We're not done. It goes beyond that with Julia, because in so many ways, Julia became Nancy number 2. And this is how I mean. Julia approached me after she read the book and she said, I want to be involved. I'm like, well, what do you mean? So whatever you're doing with this, I want to be involved. I want to help. I want to do whatever it takes. This book changed my life. I want to help. So I said, okay, but if you want to be involved, the very first thing you have to do is do what Nancy and I did. We have to do the work. And I don't know if you want to speak on that. And what that entailed was, what the work really entails is being raw in front of each other. And it comes down to things like triggers and dealing, really more than anything, dealing with discomfort on the spot, having real conversations, bringing up things you don't want to hear about yourself. And the thing about the process is that it's not teacher and student, it's teacher student and teacher student. What I learned through this is that the more I put these tools into my life, the more I start to figure out, wait, it's time to be the student now. Or wait, it's time to be the teacher now. And every single one of us is both of those things. And to that end, Julie and I kind of told her what my next vision was for the process, which was to, if other people were interested in doing the work, that we would work with people that way, like do group sessions, that kind of thing. And so to that, Julia, being the super organized Girl Scout preschool teacher, came up with a bunch of email sign-up sheets. So if anybody has any interest whatsoever in follow-up, these are people who've read the book. and are interested in any kind of the work in that way, please write down your email. Because it's in the back. It's in the back. Okay. And really, it's the work doesn't come until after we read the book. You know, I'm not saying that my words in this book are everything, and that because they might not hit people the same way. I mean, it really what it's about is the information here is ancient information that many people are coming up with at the same time, just in different ways. And different people are going to hear it in different ways from different people and go, I know, I like what that person's saying. That connects with me more. Or I like what I'm saying. That connects with me more. Or what's happening to me right now, or my process. But we can only concentrate on this, because this is what came through to me, and this is what resonated with you or whoever. So,
Can I say one sentence
absolutely.
about your no, I don't even.
Okay.
So I just want to say that we've been doing some book session, like follow-up session planning, and I'm really impressed with how careful he's been with the planning, and how thoughtful and mindful he's been about it, because he really cares about who shows up and what their experience is going to be. So I just want to say that about the planning part of the follow-up that would happen if you sign up and we see you.
Well, that's because ego gets involved in everything. I don't care, if you wrote a book, you can get stuck in fact, it says it right in the book. I couldn't write this book until I got over my own shit. And because when I first went through this, and Nancy and I were talking, like, I got to write a book. Everybody's going to read it, and then I'm going to teach. And she's like, no, you're not. Not if you talk like that, like, so ego is, looking in the mirror is constant. It never ends. So, thank you, Julia. All right, so we have time, probably about 10, 15 minutes for some questions. So if anybody has a question. None? Yes, Ann. Yes. Not ones that I'm ready to talk about. Yeah. And it's funny because they asked me earlier, are you going to write a second book? And I said, well, I said I wasn't going to write a first book. And Nancy said, yes, you are. You will. So yes, but it's not something that, it delves into some deeper things. Yeah. But really this is about especially in a time like right now in the world, we're not going to solve our problems by pointing fingers at each other. We're going to solve them by looking inward. A lot more than I had. And I think the part you're talking about was definitely during the awakening process, having a foot in many different realities at once, and trying to live a normal 3-dimensional life while I'm, going through these other things at the same time. So yeah, that was, and while going through the work with Nancy, because it got intense. It got pretty intense, But the whole time it got intense, we're both going, this needs to happen. We know this needs to happen. So, and really that's what it's about in the end, is being able to stay in it with the discomfort, because then something beautiful is on the other side. Well, I can tell you through my experience in the book, what I came to after the awakening process was that it's not as simple as off-planet beings, as it might be, that there are 3-dimensional beings that are on this earth, but there also may be higher level dimensional beings that aren't of any of this. Because what happened to us is, as it was all about the raising of vibration. As the vibration raised, more and more of our perception came into play. We could experience and see more as the vibration got higher. In fact, I tell a story. At one point, I was at this person, Tierra, and I didn't write Tierra into the book. You guys remember Anna from the book, but Tierra was another one, but I didn't write her into the book. I was at Tierra's house one night for dinner, and my vibration was so high. I don't know how many people of you have ever smoked pot. I was literally stoned. I was high. That's how high my vibration had gotten. And that's when I started seeing things, you know, in the sky. And yeah. And by the way, there is on the website, there is a gallery of pictures and videos and stuff. But you have to read the book to find that. So, all right, I think unless there's any more questions, we're all chosen. And I think we're all chosen in different ways. And I think if you're lucky enough to recognize when you're being, you know, plucked on the side of the head, hello, you're supposed to be paying attention right now. At that time, I was lucky enough to go, what? You know, and oh, and pay attention. And you know, whether the smear on the guy's jacket was real or wasn't real, it opened the door to an entire another world. It was real, by the way. Yeah. So I don't think I'm special. I think we're all special, equally special. All right. I think we did pretty good time. I said quarter after. It's quarter after. Thank you guys so much for coming.